o'clock. I'm going to call the meeting of the Mayor's Advisory Committee on Trees to order, and the record will show that we do have a quorum. Why don't we just go around the room, announce our names, since we are live streaming today.
Good morning, I'm Dick Byrne.
Jeff Trunzo.
Andrea Hoffman.
Bunky Markert.
Terry Eskew.
I'm Tony Sharp. I'm the chair of this committee.
And Lily Secretary Ann Womack.
Ann Womack is here with us, as is customary. For today, I'm going to jump right into our correspondence. I don't know if everybody's had a chance to read the letter that we've received. The issue is clear space. And so if everybody has seen this, it is online for viewing, so we won't spend a great deal of time on this. I want to try to make sure, and Liz Lingo has just joined us, which is a great addition to our team. I want to make sure that everybody today knows I'm driving toward an adjournment at 11:30 today. So an hour and a half, and we'll see where we are at approximately 11:20, and then we'll go from there. So I thought I would start today by just going directly into a very quick update from me from our last meeting, which was March something. March, I have it right here in front of me. 15? It was March 8th.
8th.
March 8th.
Yeah.
And one of the last things we talked about at that meeting was starting this one with some comments made toward the end of our meeting. And we were in a discussion about tree canopy. And two of our very important members, as are everybody, Sturgis Dodge and Bunky Markert, talked a little bit, and I hope you remember, talked a little bit about telling the truth. Telling the truth, if you recall that statement, about our practices and policies and how they really do, or our perspective, how they impact our tree canopy. So I want to hold that out here for just a minute. That is something we are going to need to have some discussion about. So it's going to be a truth-telling discussion. Another one of my updates for this group is, since I had given the presentation to the commissioners as a result of all of our work on trees being part of the process when the city looks at public projects, it was my responsibility that I took at the last meeting to go ahead and have an additional meeting with Liz Lingo, Kevin Williams, our Director of Public Works, and our City Manager, Sharon Lynn. So I did that a few weeks ago, and we had a very lively conversation to make sure that as we talked about, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought for 1 second. It's all right. Just for the record, Sturgis Dodge and Susan Gay have joined us as well. Yes, I was talking about the infrastructure trees, our approach going forward. So I had a very productive and lively discussion with Liz, Kevin Williams, and the city manager. And the reason for that is we wanted to make sure we're all speaking the same type of language, which is what the commissioners agreed to, is that trees are equally as important as every other facet of a public project. They're not less important, they're not more important, they're equally important as other issues. So as a result of that meeting, I think we were all in agreement that that we're going to stay focused until we get that project finished on the process. So Liz, the city manager, and Kevin Williams, at my request, will take the opportunity to develop what they feel is a really good internal process. They'll get back with me, and I know we'll have to, these are the kinds of things that we've got to keep tabs on, because as we get really busy and our staff here in the city gets busy, we still need to make progress and advance the ball. And just for the record, Catherine Downs is here as well.
Late as always.
No. We're absolutely thrilled to have you. So, Liz, I don't know if you have any additional update since we met, but in the absence of that, we'll just keep our eye on how you're progressing.
I can update you if you want to
Please.
now, if you feel. So we were able, after Commissioner Sharp brought all the relevant parties together, we sat down and came up with a good flow chart for our internal process about where the arborist and the landscaping would come in, which is somewhere around that 30% design stage. So we have to have some baseline facts like limits of disturbance, what we're doing before we can really think about the trees. But as long as we are able to kind of get in at the beginning, it's a lot easier to affect change and make slight adjustments to plans than if we come in at the end. So I was able to develop a flow chart that the public works director and the city manager were happy with, which I'm sure as we go by and learn will also have its own adjustments. And then also Kevin wanted me to come up with a few, because that's more for like big projects where we're contracting out designers, engineers. Internally, every time, the water department goes to put in a water meter for a new property, or they have to dig below a tree canopy, we're developing a couple of guidelines for that and making sure that the guys have the appropriate tools. So say if we come up with don't cut any root over 2 inches underneath a tree canopy without talking to the city arborist, this is just an example, that anything under 2 inches, they have hand pruners and appropriate hand saws, and they're not taking, a hatchet or a backhoe to it, those type of basic things. So coming up with a few of those guidelines, as well as a general set of standards and bid specs for tree protection, planting, pruning, that type of thing, for the larger city projects. So maybe like 1/3 of the way done, I'd say, half.
Thank you, Liz, because I just wanted to make sure everybody is aware that progress is being made. And I had also discussed with Mayor Coons that as soon as the processes are all in place, I will be a part of that. I will brief Mayor Coons to make sure we're all aligned in our language and our result. One of the most important things I think to illustrate is that when we elevate our trees and include them, as Liz just described, we may have to have subsequent discussions about what's the impact of this. If it results in additional budget implications, we will have to deal with that. It doesn't mean, and we can't have the position that, or I believe we can't have the position that we can spend unlimited funds to preserve and protect. We will have to do and work with the best interest of the city and how we spend taxpaying money. So that's just a quick update on where we are with infrastructure going forward. And it will stay on as an item to update until we actually decide we're finished. We've got a good process, but the process will always be dynamic. The next thing is the Commemorative Tree Program. And the reason I just wanted to make sure I mentioned it is so that it doesn't get lost in the planning for everyone's spring and summer. So Andrea, could I turn to you for a second just to give us a quick update?
Yes, I've been away since, I guess December, which is when I made my last call. I have two people on the hook that are interested. One of them left for Florida, and I will be in touch with them. The other one was busy until the spring, and I will be in touch with them. So both of them, I will make calls this week.
Great. And what,
This is the commemorative, we're going to do a commemorative tree so that people can donate.
It's for the design.
Honor and in memory of, and it's gonna go on the wall out there. Do you remember this?
the artwork,
I do, but what are we,
We're looking for woodwork, we're looking for
Oh, the,
woodworkers.
okay, the limbs,
These are
okay,
the
okay.
limbs.
I
The
remember.
limbs, the limbs.
Yeah.
Yes, okay?
The
Yes.
trunk
So the trunk and the limbs.
Yeah,
Okay.
got it.
So-
As a woodworker, this is a woodworker.
Yes,
front.
these are woodworkers, yes.
Mhm.
So I have two on the hook, both of whom said they could not do the work without being paid.
Did they give you an idea of what?
That's part of the Dewey Artist Collaborative. Give me the name.
I don't know his name, but I'll try to find out. He right now is displaying artwork at a muse, and I've heard he's really good. He has a studio in, I guess, a studio space or a studio somewhere.
I've contacted 10 people, so he may
Okay,
have
he
been
may-
one of them, but please get me that name.
Okay.
Okay.
and just to level set this particular project, this is the project that the commissioners approved
Yes.
in May of last year. So the ball is honestly in our court to, as Andrea has been so diligent in trying to find us an artist to create the artwork itself. And
install.
And to me, that's a big lift to try to find someone that'll do this for us. And I have talked to Liz as well as the city manager that if the issue is we will have to pay someone as opposed to getting it, a donation to us, then we work together that there is funding for this type of initiative. And that was something that was illustrated to the commissioners as well. Terry.
Quick question I had for Liz, just to update us. How many trees were you hoping through this program to plant? I think at one time you had given us an approximate number.
Probably looking at about the initial would be different because I have like a list of people that may or may not be interested still. But once that's done, maybe like 10 a year would seem reasonable, I think.
And what was the total? I think you gave us a number, didn't you, one time about like how many you wanted to actually achieve or something? No. Oh,
If
okay.
I did, it was a long time ago and I don't remember.
How many are
on the list?
I don't have that memorized.
Well,
more
and
than 10.
let's
Oh,
not,
yeah.
let's not devolve into the
Nitty-gritty.
specific details at this point, but I did want to resurrect this item so that next time we meet, it'll be an agenda item in case we need to just refresh our memories and give Liz an opportunity to take another look so that we can remind everybody what the objective was and whether or not this is something we can all pull together and be helpful and move forward.
Yeah.
So it's another one of these issues that I'm trying desperately not to let it fall to the wayside and then not have any particular improvement. I think that is it on my list for the moment. Electronic devices, everybody, make them,
Disappear.
we'll make them invisible for the next hour and 15 minutes or so.
Commissioner Sharp, can I
Yes.
put one more thing on the record about the
Yes, Liz.
commemorative tree?
Please.
Part of the reason we've taken so long, and I'm so thankful that Andrea was able to step in, is because we did decide instead of purchasing it through a company pre-done, which we could have had it purchased and installed, we were gonna go this route to support our local community and make it something unique and special. So it's taken more time, but I think we'll be a lot happier in the end and a lot more, keeping our money local and supporting.
Absolutely. And
good
it'll be an
local
art.
artists.
It's an
Yeah,
art,
no,
work of
right.
art.
So instead of just purchasing from somebody in Ohio that manufactures a bajillion a year.
Right.
And this is helpful to me too, as well, so that the next time the mayor asks us for updates for the committees, I can actually remind the commissioners. We haven't forgotten what you approved a year ago, but we're still in there pitching. We're going to get this done. And hopefully we'll have a really good outcome for it. Okay, Arbor Day. Old business. Arbor Day is coming very, very quickly.
Fast approaching.
Fast approaching, just in the next couple of weeks. So who would like to talk a little bit about Arbor Day, where we are, remind everybody of all of our important dates, which we did last time, but it never hurts to remind everybody what's going to happen when, and we'll just go from there. So take it away, Sturgis.
I will. I mean, you know, they were all kind of little moving pieces.
Yes.
And we kind of handled them, and because we had a very low budget to no budget, you know, we really kind of worked hard. And that took a little extra work to get things very inexpensively. It could still work. And also, since this is a kind of a show, I've never hung before, and you know, so there was some logistical issues, but we worked those out. With some consult from Nick Serator at the Art League. He and I met. I managed to get herded the cats of 4th and 5th grader art projects and got all that. And we judged them and we chose the winners, and they've had their giclée copies made. So kind of what's left to do at this point, we've got to do some signage for the show. We've got a 10 foot by, 10 by 6 piece of foam core that we're gonna draw a big tree on, and that's gonna be mounted somewhere down in that space with some markers, washable markers, for people to write comments on, people that come to see the show. So,
And for the public, since we're live streaming, Sturgis, can you remind everybody on the dates,
okay.
if you have them?
I do. For the planting, this sort of Arbor Day observance, the mayor reading the proclamation and the planting of the tree, that will be on the lakeside yard of the Rehoboth Elementary School at 10:30 in the morning on Monday, the 29th of April. And there will be 4th graders at 10:30, 5th graders at 11. A woman whose last name escapes me right now, her name is Ashley, but she's the education person for the Delaware Forestry Service. And she found out what we were doing. I think Don Ott, one of our teachers, talked to him, and she's coming down. She thinks what we're doing is wonderful and wants to come and wants to talk and is gonna be part of that ceremony. In addition to that, Bunky has been working on a song.
Well, okay, I'll discuss.
You'll just go, okay. And that's, so we've got some different ideas. We'll be talking to Bunky about the tree song.
Right.
And
Well, it's gonna be kind of a presentation, I think, a song and presentation, so to
song
speak.
and presentation.
Yeah.
It's kind of
Song
like,
and dance.
it's a,
Well, we're getting there.
it's got,
Next year, the dance.
it's sort of
Yeah.
got rap lyrics that talk about all the things about trees.
It didn't start out that
Simple
way.
little
but,
Did it?
well, in a way.
Kind of
I'll just give you a little bit of background. You two scoured the internet, the entire
We did.
internet.
We did.
And shockingly, we didn't find a lot of songs or things that were like appropriate material. There's a lot of poems about trees, but songs seem to be kind of light. And there's some person, I don't know, that we'll probably need to give an attribution or something. But anyway, someone who creates elementary level curricula came up with this song sort of a thing that I think was recommended to be used by teachers in telling the story about trees or something like that, which I was personally concerned about the fact that we're dealing with 4th and 5th graders who, are not, they're not the kiddiest kids. They have a little bit of, discernment and whatever. So I don't think you can put anything before them, without it, whatever. So I was trying to be conscious of that. But the song that was presented was kind of a fast tempo, and it's basically just a verse or a chorus rather, and then like a spoken passages interspersed with, I think it's like six verses describing things about tree, who lives in trees, what makes up trees, what do trees do, that kind of stuff. And there is an educational component there. And then it has this little chorus, this little 8-bar chorus or whatever. So I just thought to try to make it a little bit, if you did it at the rate, at the tempo of the original thing, you'd just be rattling off the stuff and you wouldn't be able to really understand or hear anything. So I just thought that you needed to slow it down. So I did that. I slowed it down, and then I kind of sketched it out in terms of how we would do it. And then the recurring chorus, which is quite simple, and I think we could have the children join in on. I think would make sense. And I'm thinking the way that we may do this, and we can discuss this separately or whatever. I don't want to get in the weeds about it, but in some way that direct them that it's a repetitive thing, and you just do it. So then it has these verses that would be spoken or rapped or however you want to present that or whatever, and then the whole thing lasts about 3 minutes. So that's the idea.
So depending on how long this is, we might do the whole thing with the fourth graders and repeat it with the fifth, depending on the timing, or we could legitimately split it in the middle and do half of it with one class and half with the other, depending on how that works. So we haven't quite got the whole program worked out in terms of, so we need to talk to Liz, who's usually kind of the MC of all this, figure out who does what when and
I think a poster board with the chorus is how we'll go.
Right. I mean, we can talk about that, but that's the sort of way I envision it. Once you've heard it, you've got it.
Okay.
So that's our kind of little, those are our additions to the normal kind of Arbor Day thing. And then the other kind of bigger addition is the art opening reception on Tuesday, April 30th. Again at 10:30, fourth graders, 11 fifth graders, which is going to be right down here in the, kind of lobby atrium space out here.
What time did you say?
10:30 with the fourth graders, and then they'll leave, and then the fifth graders come. The teachers kind of told us that's the only way to make this manageable. And then we'll be saying a few words. We'll be announcing the winners, and the kids will grab 1 or 2 cookies and kind of out the door kind of thing.
So if anybody can make those dates, both on the 29th and the 30th, I know everybody would be appreciative if you can possibly work your schedules. I know there are lots of demands on everybody, so if you can make it, that's great.
And everybody got an invitation.
Yeah, and it was beautiful.
Aren't they?
Oh my gosh.
Was it mailed or I didn't get anything?
Email.
Email.
Instantly
See,
elevated.
this is a problem.
It's
We
just,
discovered this morning that the city has a bad email address. for
Yeah,
me.
hers were bouncing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't get anything from this committee. Yeah.
Well, maybe we could talk about that offline.
And can I just ask, I know you have everything arranged, but is the invitation enough for press and social media?
Well, I was just gonna ask if there was gonna be a press release.
Yeah.
Have you talked to Chris?
Yeah,
about
there's a
that?
press release. It
Okay.
just doesn't go out, and when
Yeah.
we had talked about it, it was like a month and a half before.
Yeah.
So it goes out. I forget what a week before, something like that. But she knows about it, and I'll remind her
And
anyways.
Chris Flood, I believe, got an invitation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So are you looking for sponsors for it, or what are you?
No, I'm gonna I'll purchase the tree and have it planted, and then when we finalize the program, I think it's the mayor saying welcome and reading the proclamation, and then Ashley is gonna do her little. Which Sturgis didn't mention, but she was thrilled that we were able to kind of slide her in a little 10-minute slot. She has a program, and her program is actually tailored to fifth grade, so she said it will work for fourth as well. So she was really excited about it. So once we get that program finalized and decide who goes where, I think we'll be good, because it's really just those 3 things, right?
And the song,
Song, the welcome, the song,
welcome.
and Ashley.
proclamation and the planning.
Terry?
Ashley did mention that she would get a tree for us. Did you talk to her?
Yeah, they
It's not what we want.
It's the little 5-gallon things, which it's a fruit tree, but
Yeah, we want an oak. We're getting
You want-
Who
want
is
a big
Ashley?
tree.
Who is
That's
Ashley?
the
she
person that-
is the education coordinator for the Delaware Forest Service.
Oh,
So
okay.
they have two arborists and one education coordinator.
Oh, okay.
And I would like to highlight, Liz, correct me if I'm wrong, that the planting will be an oak.
yes, yes.
And that's important to our high canopy in the future. I hope we'll all live to see that tree way, way, way down the road.
I just want to add that this is part 1, and hopefully down the road, when the new school is finished, we will do another tree planting and have another ceremony. So, there's another opportunity, I hope.
Well, I'm so glad you brought that up because I wanted to ask this group while I'm watching our time, because the meat of our discussion will be our part 2 presentation for the commissioners. But before we go to that, Arbor Day, to me, might this group be interested in our next agenda talking about Arbor Day Part 2 with a fall of 2019 rather than 2020? Anybody want to speak to that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I was, like I said before, I just think fall is the best time of the year to plant. And what I'd like to do is, just thinking about the way I'd like to get involved with this. I wasn't able to this year with the Arbor Day, but, I'd love to make a bigger event and have many more trees and get a community involvement and have more trees planted.
Boy Scouts should be planting, I'm with you, totally.
Well, how about for our next meeting, one of the agenda items will be, because we will have already completed spring of 2019 Arbor Day, and when we meet in May, if we decide we're going to do that, I'll put this on our agenda to have a discussion in detail, because what I always believe is going to happen to us come May, before we turn around, the summer will have gotten away from us, and it will be fall of 2019.
Yes.
So I'll put this as an agenda item.
Yes.
And Andrea and I were just kind of motioning to each other, we'd like to, we'll chat about it and see, and we'll kind of do a little bit more, give a little more information at the next meeting.
So what I will do at the next meeting is I will put this on our agenda, and I will turn it over to Andrea and Terry.
We can always plant in like early November too. I mean,
Exactly.
that would be a great time, because the kids have, there's less going on in like right in the beginning of November for.
And while we're on that subject, I was going to ask you for your expertise in dealing with nurseries. As far as their stock that's available, does that impact them at all that it's the end of the season? I know they get a lot in the spring, but in the fall, do they still have enough available?
They still have a lot available, and a lot of times you can find things at discount.
That's what I was thinking too. That's
that's-
how we did it last time.
Yeah, last fall I
Yeah,
had a
we
really
got
good
some good
experience with
bargains.
I
Okay.
can't remember which one.
But it is good tree plantings time of year, and I'm just thinking if we're gonna try to, maybe a part and parcel to that is to try to have some kind of a statement or something that this is tree planting season, and to try to, involve more people to plant
Well, and
trees.
in that case, you ought to do it early on in the tree planting season so that people get motivated and then.
Right, but I mean, I'm just saying, like,
Call her
I would say
landscaper.
September 1.
What'd you say?
Called our landscaper, make
Yeah,
sure you
say
get in there
what?
2 months in advance.
Okay, so that's a plan for next, and if anybody has strong feelings or ideas, funnel them to Terry and Andrea, because they will be the leadership on this. Great. Okay, we're going to move into what I put on the agenda as our part 2 of connecting with our commissioners, really, about what it is that we may or may not have an ask. Before we do that, I think everybody is very clear on the presentation that was given February 4th on infrastructure and where we are on that. Now, where I think we're going, and I need this group to confirm that's where we're going, is really our pathway. And as I started the meeting, reminding us some of the words that we ended our last meeting, which was to start telling the truth about our policies and practices that impact the canopy, just from a level setting standpoint. That's one thing that I won't lose track of. But before we start deciding as a team exactly what this part 2 is, could I ask everybody just to refresh for me, what are you passionate about? Many of you I know where your passion is, but as we've moved through the last year, can you refresh for me, what are you passionate about? And what is it that you want to accomplish on this committee in the short term? And could I start with Terry? Could I ask you to be the first one
Pass.
to, you can always
Could we start at the
pass.
head of the
You can
table
pass.
I'll
Definitely not.
start it.
Okay,
Oh,
Jeff will start
you,
first.
I'm buying you dinner tonight.
So what I'd like to accomplish is simple. I would like to have a new design standard so that when we do any work in the city, as we redevelop the commercial area, as we do infrastructure like sidewalk repair, we have a new design standard that totally supports the green infrastructure, meaning we have more trees planted in an environment where they will thrive and survive. More and better is what I'm looking for.
And just one additional question on that to clarify, Jeff. When you speak of it that way, are you speaking of public property, private property, or both?
I'm so glad you said that. Because the state of the literature on the environment now is that basically all land on the East Coast is in private hands. And making policy for public areas is a drop in the bucket. You must do everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if I could rephrase, it is public, but possibly more importantly, private.
It's everything.
Okay. Okay, that's great. Who would like to, Andrea?
I'm just so lucky to go after.
Yes.
Yes. Ditto.
Ditto, yes.
Ditto. But I guess I feel very strongly about the high canopy in particular.
What's your, just, can you try to articulate what your vision is for high canopy?
My vision for high canopy is that I would like to protect what is here and add to it where appropriate, but protect what is here. And that, a lot of that is private.
And when you speak of it, are you speaking public and
I am
private?
speaking
Public and private, acknowledging that a lot of
Yes.
our canopy may very well be on private property. Okay.
And that's tricky. I mean, I think
yeah.
it's very
Very much
tricky.
so.
Yeah, excuse me for interrupting. I had a question I was going to follow up on Jeff. Jeff, when you talk about, I'm quoting you, a new design standard, how do you see this committee? I mean, that's a great global, goal. But how do you see this committee feeding into that? Because that's a really big global goal.
And I'm going to intervene here for 1 second and say, can we hold the answer to that question? Let's just do this initiative of stating what our priorities are. Then Jeff, we will
I have
come,
an answer.
we will come right back to you. So let's quickly,
man with the
everybody else. Catherine. What are you passionate about, and really, why are you on this committee?
Well, I would like to see, certainly a better thought towards, more thought towards design with trees in mind for both public and private space. I would like to also see more green infrastructure, not only just trees, but trying to get across the point of how important it is to consider green infrastructure as a whole, being pervious paving and being wastewater, stormwater and wastewater recycling, and some being able to incorporate that in the downtown areas. And it's hard on the residential lots. One thing that I would really like to see is the size of houses be smaller so that there is more space for high canopy trees and planting on residential
lots.
Okay, thank you. Bunky?
I regard the trees in Rehoboth to be a resource that requires management, and that management be promulgated with a overarching policy, which I think is what, certainly what Jeffrey touched upon. But we obviously have a tree ordinance, currently in place, and I think we need to revisit, as I think, the commissioners and the CDP certainly reflects that, that we revisit that to see that that is effective and effectively managing that resource. I think the trees certainly are one of the key pillars of this, what is unique and valuable about the city. And when we always talk about what's the character of the city or what's the city charm and all that kind of stuff, I think, trees are certainly an integral part of that. And therefore, I think I would just say that up to this point, I believe that there's been an attempt to address that, but I don't think it's been addressed fully and as effectively as it could be. So I guess that's my goal, is to be able to set out to be able to establish an overarching policy that everybody buys into, and then I would say ordinances that may affect, zoning ordinances that would affect the management of the resource so that it endures and grows.
Thank you. Terry?
I was just thinking as Bunky was talking, the reason I joined this group was back in November of 2017 after the Ed McMahon talk, which was so inspiring about, as Bunky mentioned, the uniqueness and the value of trees and the having effective policies to have trees become an integral part of the city policy that creates that charm and uniqueness. And so after that talk, I remember I walked up to Sturgis and Susan and said, how can I join as a volunteer? What can I do? One of the things, I guess, one of my priorities is I kind of walked out of that meeting and walked onto Rehoboth Avenue and said, is what's happening on Rehoboth Avenue as far as the green infrastructure, the trees, what have you, does that represent the importance that we should give to the uniqueness and the charm and the funding we're willing to provide and the policies we're willing to create and enforce? So as far as, I guess, one of my priorities is, I've always kind of said, and this kind of goes back to, I talked to a year ago, I kind of spent some time contacting various cities and towns around the United States on both the East and West Coast. And a lot of them said, and it was a phrase that kept coming to me over and over again, was the city has to set the standard, because we can all talk about private property and what people should be doing, but if they don't see that the city is setting the standard, then you're kind of, you're not really getting the full buy-in. So I guess I have a twofold thing is I think Rehoboth Avenue I'd like to concentrate on, as you were talking about, green infrastructure and making it more manageable for water management, what have you, and having the policies in place and hopefully the funding to do that. The other thing I'd like to do is, could we do a 2-year moratorium on crepe myrtles in the city? Because I am so tired of people putting in crepe myrtles and then they do what's called the crepe murder, which they cut them back to the little knuckles. So they don't even become trees. So anyway.
Thank you. And I'm gonna violate my own rule here. And I'm gonna put Mayor Coons on the spot, because he's got a schedule to keep to. And I don't wanna lose you, Mayor, in case you have to get up and leave us. But on the issue of the vision for Rehoboth Avenue, could you talk a little bit about that in the broader, at the 100,000-foot level of how the city really views our gateway? Or do you want me to come back to you?
Oh, no, I can answer that.
The microphones.
I think it would be.
I think it's off.
Because Ann will appreciate that. It's on.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
It would be a lot different in my mind if we were planning a streetscape today on Rehoboth Avenue. Unfortunately, when the streetscape was done 10+ years ago, they were thinking about paving. And and there were some trees in the middle of the road that were burdensome, so take them out. Now, it's been done, we've been putting in trees, and I think Liz has done a great job with her staff to, replace some of those trees that have died over time. But the limitations are there on Rehoboth Avenue. And so, in order to put, whether it's canopy trees or trees with larger bulbs, it's construction, and it's very expensive construction. So I don't know that Rehoboth Avenue can be the way you guys would envision it if, in fact, we were doing a complete streetscape. However, again, going back to what Liz has done, I think she's done a good job of pulling out what I thought were trees that were kind of unsightly and has been replacing trees that she seems to think, and I think too, that are better suited for the conditions. Now, you'll never have a 50, 100-foot oak on Rehoboth Avenue because there's just no infrastructure for it the way it is. So, I think the only thing that we can do over time with Rehoboth Avenue is working with Liz and figuring out what are the right trees, bushes, whatever it is, that can fit in the avenue that we have. I don't know that we want to take out any sidewalks. I don't know if we want to take out any bump outs. And so, not to say that we're stuck with it, but we kind of are. And unless someone's got some better ideas, I just, I look down Rehoboth Avenue, and it would be great if it was all just tree lined like, many of the neighborhoods, but I just don't think that's ever going to happen. So, given that, now what can we do? And I think that comes down to Liz working with her type of people, arborists, whatever, and figuring out how we can create the best case scenario given what our needs are on Rehoboth Avenue. We have to have needs that people can walk around because there's a lot of cars around, parking and stuff. And so that's kind of.
Harry, I'm going to allow you one question, and then I'm going to get back to finishing up our group. But go
Real
ahead
quick,
if you've got
just
a question for the mayor.
picture. This is a typical, bump around for one of the things. My question was, Liz, have we ever investigated if you need a larger planting area? Has anybody ever looked at maybe even just removing the brick area to give you more space?
I mean, they could, but that won't make.
It wouldn't make that much difference?
No, to really support a mature tree, we need way more soil. So 3-foot depth is the max depth that matters if we're talking streetscape. And these were done 3 feet deep from the specifications. I wasn't here when they were done, so as long as it was done to spec, it's fine. But so that means we basically need about an 8x8 above, like 65 square feet if it's somewhere around there, if it's 3 feet deep. There's no way we're gonna get that. Pulling out pavers, it could help, but long-term and that's I think what the mayor's getting at. We can do some small retrofit things, which will be very costly with a limited result, or we can focus on potential streetscapes on Baltimore and Wilmington and make sure that we are focused on that moving forward.
And that's the whole reason that you all are coordinating with the city now.
Well, and I don't want to get into I don't want to get into the discussion yet, but I do want to remind us, this is the second or third time the mayor has mentioned this to us and explained this to us. So I'm really glad you brought it up, Terry, because it's up to us to figure out if we want to, as the mayor just said, well, knowing the way it is, what do we want to do about it? Is there something that we want to do about it that can improve it, that is efficient in cost and could or could not make a difference? So I'm highlighting the ones in here that as we get to the end of our discussion, these are going to be the segments of pieces that I'm going to ask everybody, which one do you want to get aligned with in order to manage us through what it really is part 2 that we're looking at for the commissioners. So thank you, Mayor. That's very helpful. And I want to pick up again with Susan on what are you passionate about and what do you want to do? What,
And before I get to that, let me just ask a quick follow-up question to Liz. Lake Avenue, when that was done, are those of the appropriate depth, or are those similar to the Rehoboth Avenue, or when those bump outs were done for trees, or?
Well, I actually got partially, and I got consulted on that at least, so I was able to do the the bump outs themselves were already done by the engineers, but I was able to specify the soil mixture and choose the species and stuff, and make sure we had root barriers installed, so I got some of my wish list on that,
Okay.
so to speak.
Because obviously that was new, so we weren't retrofitting, and I love the way the bump outs there work. I'd love to see that done.
so Susan, talk
But,
about
okay.
your passion.
Well, first of all, ditto times 5 here. I mean, everything that's been said before me is exactly in line with my own thinking. And so the only piece I'll add is the elephant in the room, which is that without enforcement and without the proper legislation, none of these visions can be realized. And in recent months, the city is going in exactly the opposite direction. I personally feel that we do not have we don't have a functioning tree ordinance anymore. I might as well just throw it out. But and I know that the Law Oversight Committee's been working on one, and I'll be honest, I haven't been keeping up the last couple months, so I don't know where they are in that process, but I also don't know if our vision aligns with what they're doing. So if we really want to see the city change, if we really want to make these things happen, then we have to get to that stage. We can't just talk about it. And like I say, I see too much going in the opposite direction, and it really, scares me.
Okay.
So your vision is fear, okay. That's good, I'm like, oh, doom and gloom.
Can you say something positive? Well, that's why I said ditto times 5, because you all said it in much more,
Well,
in a much
I
more
don't-
articulate way than I could.
I don't think I'm gonna let you off the hook quite that easy, because of all the things that have been said, which yours is a good addition to that, because you're taking us, you're helping us to do parallel things, parallel thinking here. Of the ones that have been said so far, which one rises the most to the top for you?
I think a couple of things. First of all, definitely the new design standard. I just think that's necessary and protecting our canopy. But I also think that what Terry said is absolutely right too. The city should be setting the standard, because people will say, well, why should I plant a big tree, or why should I put my efforts toward that if the city's not going to do it on their own property? So I do think that's important too.
Thank you. Sturgis.
Well, it's probably no secret, I mean, for me, it's
Say it,
if you
say
don't
it,
know by now.
say it and own it.
I mean, it's really high canopy. I mean, that's really what it is. I mean, when we look at how we've been describing this town, how we do it historically, how we do it in everything we publish about the town, how we do it in every CDP, it's, where mature trees reach the ocean. And, I had the opportunity to go and talk to Carol Everhart, and I asked her, she's the head of the chamber, and I said, would you be willing to be quoted? And she said, absolutely. And I will read you her quote.
Wonderful.
Nice. Here's what she said. Rehoboth Beach is a small town that has retained the flavor of the past. It is the charm that is a driving factor for people coming to Rehoboth Beach. I believe the mature trees are a large part of that charm and hope the city will work to save them. Like many good things, you don't miss them until they are gone.
That's great.
And, to me, Rehoboth Avenue, I mean, I think a struggle with Rehoboth Avenue is the scale of it. We're hampered by the fact that we had a train go down the middle of the street. It's never going to be, you know what I'm saying? A cozy tree-lined pedestrian, it just can't because of how wide the darn thing is. And the only place that can sustain high canopy trees is private property, except for our parks. So, my overarching thing is to have policies, ordinances, visions, and enforcement that preserve and promulgate and replace the high canopy trees on primarily private property.
Well said.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dick.
Thank you. Well, I'm like Susan, ditto times, where are we at 6? 8 now?
9.
I mean, I certainly agree. everything's been said, and I think that, you know, we could articulate that into a couple of statements that really give us a vision. So the two things that occur to me are the importance of setting the standard, and then how can that translate into realistic policy? How can that translate? Because we can set all the standards we want, but if that doesn't become policy and enforceable policy, that the city achieves consensus around, and that's critical to achieving consensus around that. And then the other thing that I think we are on our way as a committee is to continue to work very intentionally at being taken seriously by the rest of the city, by the rest of city government, by the other elected officials, and by the citizens. Because this can often be viewed as kind of fluff compared to other issues and things that are happening in the city. And I think we're on our way. I think we've started that, but we need to, I think, hold that in front of us, that this is serious work, and it's serious for the future of our city.
Thank you. This is great, I think. And I've skipped over Liz.
I was wondering if you and I were gonna go.
And you were all going
Would you like to comment, Liz?
Sure. I find myself agreeing and nodding with everything you guys have said and highlighting a couple of key phrases that came up a few times: green infrastructure, high canopy design, the ordinance, although we've guised that in policy and standards, and then charm and character. But I think one thing that we haven't said, and I'll preface this besides the fact why I'm here, because I am being paid to be here, but obviously I wouldn't do this job if I didn't love it. So that caveat is in there. But taking my position as city arborist, even almost putting that aside, even if I wasn't city arborist, if I was on this committee, why I would be here, besides the beach and boardwalk, I can't think of anything more defining and iconic in our city, maybe the Dolly sign, than and Funland, than our landscaping. And that includes the trees and the hydrangeas and the ornamental grasses, the things that people from DC, I probably told you guys this story before, but one of my best friends is a landscape architect and an arborist out in the DC area. And whenever she comes to visit me, I can't even get her 1 block to the beach because she stops and looks at everybody's yard. And like one of the yards you look at, it has these hydrangeas. I think they're like the Nico blue, old timey ones that have been there since I was a child. She's like, oh, they're just so beautiful. And I'm like, I just walk by them and don't even look because they're commonplace. The crepe myrtles, people from outside of here adore them. I get asked all the time. Rehoboth Avenue, everybody thinks it's green and leafy who comes to visit here. So taking all that into account, that I think it is arguably one of our most identifying features. But besides that, I think the public support and involvement and all these things can get us there, the key phrases, I think, but it's not been mentioned. The most important thing is that we don't just have the people in this room on board, because we're all here because we're on board, right? But the people that are at home or whatever, you know, make sure everybody's buying into this, that we have widespread public support, because if we just have, you know, 10 people sitting here and maybe 50 other people throughout the public that are like, oh, this is awesome, we're not going to get anywhere. That's a starting point, but we have to make sure that everybody feels some sort of pressure. And my friends and family will joke with me about, oh, the tree dropped leaves on my lawn, I gotta cut it down now. And I'm like, well, if you wanna live and breathe air, we gotta keep it. And they're teasing me, don't get me wrong, but to make sure it's not just the nice, fluffy type of stuff that we're talking about, but they are essential. You know, not just for the charm and the identifying features and all that, but like we have to have them to live, right? The baseline. Cool. So yeah, I mean, there's so many different benefits, and everybody will identify with a different part of the tree benefits, so to speak. But making sure we try to reach that broader public.
Thank you.
Can I add one
Andrea,
thing?
yes.
Maybe, as Liz was talking, I was thinking about it. I guess maybe one thing to add would be thinking about incentives to keep trees
Yes.
on private property.
I think that factors into all of this,
It-
but
it
maybe
does,
not
but
its
I want to
own.
use that word.
Put like a
Yeah.
star
Okay.
on your house if you've
Yes,
got more than
something.
like 3 trees.
I love that idea, and I want us to hold it for just 1 minute. Because now that we've completed this, I want to offer that 4 themes, in my opinion, are bubbling up. And incentives is gonna fit into one of them, I believe. But what I'm hearing, and y'all help me on this, because if there are 5 or 6, I don't want to walk out of here with just 4. The first one is new design standards, green infrastructure.
Yes.
Okay, I'm getting
Yeah.
nothing but
That's-
affirmative on that.
Yes.
Rehoboth Avenue vision / streetscape challenges.
Tony, I would enlarge that to
Yes?
Wilmington, Baltimore, the whole
Yeah, that's true.
business
Yeah.
district.
And that's what I mean by
Yeah.
streetscape.
Yeah.
That it isn't just, and I'll finesse these words somehow to include the entire commercial, the 3 blocks
Right.
of
We
the
don't wanna
commercial
lose any
district.
of the public or this committee, because we have
Exactly.
immediate things we can do, and maybe before we die, we may redo something.
Well, and I think the best observation, somebody hit it, and I forget who now, please tell me who uttered it, is that there may be more potential on Baltimore and Wilmington in the short term than a full-scale attack on Rehoboth Avenue.
Well, does it have to just be the commercial district too? I mean, I've kind of had these visions about wouldn't it be nice if like King Charles looked like Scarborough Avenue? I mean, it never happened, but I do wonder if we can look at the.
Country club
Well, for the
estate.
moment,
Yeah,
for
I
the
mean, I mean,
moment,
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
we're just trying to organize, because I'm gonna stop us right here. I'm trying to organize big things so we can decide what we wanna work on to get to your issue, Susan. Is it public, is it private, what is it? Because we've gotta advance the ball here for part 2. And at the end of the day, part 2, keep in mind what's happening here. In my odd little way of thinking, that as we just make decisions today, at the end of the day, we're going to the commissioners with an ask. So this is not just a circular exercise here. It's got an audience that we will have to go to either inform them or ask for something. Okay,
So you got to
Can I
go on
just
to 3 and 4.
I will. Thank you. The third one I kept hearing come up is enforcement and ordinance approach with realistic standards, and I noted under it that facilitate high canopy as just a piece of it.
Say that again.
It's enforcement and ordinance approach, which is
Other way around.
realistic.
It would be the other way around, right?
Okay,
Ordinance
thank
and-
you, it would be, thank you.
Yeah.
Ordinance and enforcement.
Ordinance, approach, and enforcement with realistic standards, and it always considers high canopy. Okay. And the fourth one I've got is public support / involvement initiatives.
The only other thing I would just like to add to that is when we talk about the design standards, I would just like to include the notion that the mayor addressed on, I think we've all addressed on, that I would say design standards that are sensitive to the restrictions or that we're sensitive to the nature of the various parts of the community. And thereby, we're not trying to put giant trees on Rehoboth Avenue, the same as we maybe want to try to do that on Henlopen Avenue. You know what I'm saying? So I just want to at least start out saying that we want to be sensitive to the various
Neighborhoods.
right, you know.
Well,
Because I don't think, I mean, we have different zones, and I would see this just my little zoning head here, that we would have tree zones, like maybe a tree zoning overlay that would address, what would you do here, what would you do over here, and it would be different. I mean, obviously, you're not planting big trees close to the ocean either, you know, so I mean, there's a lot of different.
Okay, I'm gonna stop us here because
Okay.
where Bunky's trying to take us is how.
I don't wanna
He's
go
got the
there. I'm not trying to
how
go there.
already, but this is where I wanna go too, Bunky. I'm going with you.
Yeah.
We're going together. We're going to how.
Oh,
Yes, but this is where y'all have to, this is where y'all have to help me. We've got 4, I'm gonna call them 100,000 foot segments here of how to start thinking. But what is our next step? And that's where I think you're going, Bunky, is what is our next step relevant to those 4 things? My questions are around, do we want to try to attack all 4 at the same time? Or does one have more criticality from a timing standpoint than others? I could lobby that ordinance approach and enforcement is on a shorter time frame because I do attend the Law Oversight Committee meetings, where the last one, they were talking about the current condition of the tree ordinance. I only was able to stay at that meeting for just a little bit toward an hour, and I'm not sure how they ended that meeting. If anybody's listened to it or happens to know, that would be helpful.
Was this their 4-hour meeting?
Yes, yes, I didn't make it for the whole.
They didn't
I
either.
was not, I was out.
Oh, Liz was there. Yes, I remember when I left, you were still there. How did that go for the rest of it?
They talked a lot about definitions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and maybe that's good, because if there is energy here, that there should be more linkage or more
Coordination.
assistance, coordination, all those good words. Now would be the time for whoever's going to step up is going to be asked to step up and do this. Or if we're not going to step up and do it, it's coming off this list.
So you're looking for like a liaison.
I'm looking for leadership. That if we're gonna, and here's my plea.
Johnny?
Here's my plea to our group.
I liaise,
That,
I do it. I'm already going to every one of the meetings.
right, but what I'm looking for is, and I compliment you and everybody else that tries to make it to other meetings, but what I'm asking for is really a higher level of engagement than that, which would mean reaching out to the Law Oversight Group and maybe illuminating for them some of the issues that I believe if the Law Oversight Group was just asked the question, and wait a minute, let me see where I put the question. It was a question about, where's the ordinance? Does what you're doing manage our tree resources? I think it came from Bunky. If that's the question, who's going to help them answer that? Because they've got the tree ordinance in their hands at the moment. And if that question, if we felt it's a valid question, and it would be a question that anybody in the community might ask, then if this is the highest priority for us, then we would have to act on it. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but I'm asking, and wait just one second. Okay, we've got design standards, we've got the commercial streetscape all encompassing. We've got the tree ordinance, the ordinance situation with enforcement and realism. And then we've got public support and involvement. So those are the 4 that I think we can distill down what everybody said, unless I'm missing something.
I think the streetscape should be under design. That's really what it is.
Yeah.
I think those should be one thing. That's gonna be your main thing under design, maybe.
Okay, so they're now
That-
together.
Those two are
And-
combined.
And private. I mean, well, my thought is that, I don't know if it would be under ordinances or design, but I mean, does it make sense with the amount of space that we have available on private property to require people to plant high canopy trees? I mean, that's the thing. I mean, you've got we want these high canopy trees. Well, we don't have space for them to
And
grow.
that's the quandary.
I think that's gotta go under ordinance and public support.
Yeah.
I think.
I don't know wait a minute. What is it that needs to go under ordinance and public support?
We're talking about basically we're requiring people to plant 3 trees. And those 3 trees are just usually jammed in there because the footprint of the homes, it's a small, like you look at some codes and they don't want any trees within 10 feet of your house.
Okay, but wait, let me get my mind with you. That Catherine, when you spoke, you said that something that enables a higher canopy is smaller houses.
Exactly.
So what do we I'm gonna go back to Funky's words from our last meeting. Let's start telling the truth, okay? Is the truth that anybody here believes they want to fight the battle, or if it's a battle worth fighting on zoning, that is zoning, on the size of houses?
I think we need to.
Well,
That's
let's,
the
let's.
Or help me with the
Well, let's just say
discussion.
this. We're in the last go-around that we had in 2015,
15.
we increased the rear setback from 10 feet to 15 feet. Okay, so you have 30 feet between you and your rear neighbors, and we're just saying standard building lot, that you didn't have. Well, you had 20, now you got 30. So I would say within that area, which people can put all kinds of things in there, swimming pools, sheds, whatever,
Right.
patios, everything,
Right.
that trees can go there. And there's no requirement at all. I mean, that is not addressed at all in any way. I mean, that is a place for trees that we currently have. I'm not saying it's the best place. I'm not saying it's enough. I'm not saying anything. But you've got that. We've got that now, which we didn't have before. Okay.
So maybe it's just more specificity about lot coverage.
Yeah. So.
Well,
so-
wait.
Yeah, so I'm just saying, all I'm saying is that happened, as a result of the other issues that were going on at the time. And so
Well,
forth and so on.
and I lost something. I need you to stay with me right now. I lost something that I promised I wouldn't lose, and that was the word incentives.
Right.
It's
Yeah,
good,
yeah,
Andrew,
okay.
if we're thinking the same thing,
Right.
and if where you're going, Bunky, is that in order to encourage the use of that 30 feet for what we may plead to the commissioners is the overarching goal here of planting higher canopy trees, is there an incentive that can be offered in order for folks to do that? But where does it come? Does it come in design standards? Does it come in ordinance? Where does it come?
Well, I mean.
What's it linked to?
Oh,
Yeah.
sure. I mean,
Well, I just, one thing I think that has taken the spot that the trees would go is the pool situation.
Yeah.
You either get
well, but
a
there were
smaller
other
house
issues.
and a
There were other
pool,
issues.
Right.
or you get, a big house, no pool.
Mhm.
But it's the pools plus the big house that
Or, Andrea, maybe a different way to say it, it's that we don't have any incentives that would pull people's attention toward, do I want a pool or do I want a high canopy tree? But then if we decide that this is of critical timing importance, then to me, it links so well, and y'all tell me if that's not proper thinking, it links to the ordinance. Because the ordinance, am I correct? The ordinance is where it would happen?
Yes.
The ordinance is where it would
Yes.
happen. And the ordinance is on the table right now with law
I
oversight.
think people would really choose a tree over, if they really wanted a pool, they choose a tree.
Okay, I don't want to debate it right now. What I
Right.
want to do is get it to the point where we can debate it, Susan.
Okay, right.
But what I'm looking for, and I really appreciate where you're going, but in the absence of an incentive, we're almost throwing our hands up and saying there's nothing we can do. And so it's a do something to me versus a do nothing on that. Because we don't have anything that even pauses someone, I don't think, to, maybe one could never move someone off of that decision if that's part of the way you want to go. Either way, that I'm going to have a high canopy tree, I'm going to have something else on my property.
I was surprised to hear the other day that the code enforcement officer was giving a talk about pool. He said there are 90 private pools in Houston.
Okay, I don't want to get into the, okay, wait. We can't go into the details at the moment. Catherine?
Well, one thing that, to speak to what Bunky was saying about the extra space that we got in the back, so that's an extra 5 feet, which is great. We can use that to plant. But I think that since the city requires a high canopy tree in the front yard, we need to try to make the setback, the front setback bigger too, because the front or the side, I know that this is gonna be something that's.
It's gonna be tough.
Yeah.
I'm not saying, we haven't talked about, we talk about truth, we're not really talking about reality.
Right, right.
We can talk the truth all we want, but the reality is, it's money. It's all money. It's always all money. And it's what people want and what people perceive they want. And I think, if we'll get back to your one question. I'm sorry, but you sort of, are all these things going to happen at the same time, or should they happen progressively? And I think some can happen together, but I think the overarching thing or whatever is that we have to educate the public about what it means to, with their impact, their responsibility. People have to, I think, understand, appreciate their responsibility that they have as being part of this community that has these assets. We were able to, prevent people from putting up these gigantic tents on the beach and stuff like that. There was safety issue concerns and all that kind of stuff, but it screwed up it was, people didn't like it, you know what I mean? So that was the main reason why that happens. And I just feel like if people sort of understand that, I want to build the house of my dreams on my lot, or I want to do this, whatever, that those decisions that you make, that are your decisions that you're free to make, are going to have impacts, and what those impacts are. So getting back to your incentives, I would say that the only incentive that I can see in any of this is a financial one, that you would incentivize people. And the problem is, it's really difficult for the city to be able to dispense that, because typically the only way to do it is like put some kind of tax thing or something like that. So you're going to give people $50, we'll take $50 off your, it's not going to matter at all. So I'm seeing this, and I hate to say this, but like, there's got to be some kind of thing where there's got to, the other thing we didn't include in here, but you can't manage anything without measuring it. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And we don't really have a really good measure. We don't really know exactly how much we've lost in tree canopy. We can sort of, anecdotally talk about it or whatever, but we don't really know. I know the state has certain things that they can do with these aerial photos and all that kind of stuff. There might be some way to quantify all that kind of stuff. But anyway, we're not going to know we're not going to be able to manage it until we know. And I think if we're talking about standards, I think we have to talk about what is the standard that the city wants in terms of overall coverage, and figure out what that is, and that's a number, and we would dial in that number at some time, assume we got everybody to agree upon it. And then from there, we have to sort of maintain how many trees are coming down, what's the effect on the canopy, and then we have to figure, we're gonna have to figure out a way to kind of, I think, manage it in order to incentivize people to like keep a tree or not keep a tree or whatever, so. It's complicated, it's really
It is,
complicated.
it really is.
Yeah,
And we have 10 minutes
yeah.
Can we,
to solve the world here.
Right.
But go ahead, Liz, and then I'm gonna come back to this list.
talking about the incentives, it's twofold. So we have, which we haven't addressed, the incentives that you would build into the code. And then the incentives like Mr. and Mrs. Smith who own 3 Lake Avenue, for every high canopy tree, we will reimburse you $100 or whatever that incentive may be. So those are very, very popular with sometimes mixed results. But in terms of building incentives into the code, it can be done.
A reduction of
So,
tax.
Liz, are you
Tax.
saying,
Incentive seems to work
are you
out
saying
right.
that some communities do have incentives?
Oh,
Oh yeah, like
That-
those type
that's
of,
common.
Yeah.
yeah,
know,
Casey
absolutely.
Trees does a
I
lot
know.
in DC, so you can look that up and they have several programs with, I don't know, are we?
Okay, let me bring us, Susan, let me bring us to what I'm trying to get to at the end of the next 10 minutes here. We've got 3 categories now. We had 4, and through a very good collapsing of them, we've got design standards, which include commercial streetscape. We've got ordinance/enforcement, which includes incentive with a question mark, and managing our tree resources with a question mark.
And high canopy.
Part of tree resources.
Got it. Thank you.
Won't be forgotten.
Okay.
And the third one is public support/involvement, whatever that is.
What is that?
We don't know
We're already
yet.
doing it. We got Arbor Day, Commemorative Tree.
Gotta do more than that.
Got it.
Well, and I think if these are our 100,000 foot categories, what I'm asking this team, what's next? How do we organize? How do y'all want to organize around these issues? Because what I'm looking for are leaders. If we're gonna sit around here and talk about what's right, what's wrong, what needs improvement, then we have to step up as leaders. So how do you see these? Are they equal in their sense of urgency? Is one more urgent than the other? I can see it, I can see there are several ways to organize around this. I'm asking for what do y'all want to do?
Well, Tony, it strikes me that these are not disparate items.
Okay.
That there's a strong relationship between them, and that you can't go at one without thinking of the other. And so there has to be a way to integrate the important aspect. I mean, if we're dealing with design standards, green infrastructure, that doesn't stand alone. Then that has to relate to our interest in commercial streetscape and in enforcement. I just see that there's a strong relationship between them.
So Dick, what I think I hear you saying is that you would try to attack them all simultaneously
I don't think you can attack one
without the others.
thinking of the other.
Any other thoughts? Because the one question I would have on it is, with the law oversight group having the tree ordinance in front of them right now, how does that work out for us?
I'd like to speak to that.
Jeff,
I think
go
the
ahead.
presentation we have, that you gave, with a very slight tweak, is perfect for the law report, because it tells the truth about how many trees we are losing. I think we should adjust that and ask if we can give it to that committee right now. We don't have to create anything, we can just adjust that. It was very compelling to the commissioners, and I think it should be compelling to this committee. So let's just fix it and give it.
And who is it that you think is going to give it?
I'll be happy to give it if we can find a date that works.
Their next meeting is on May 1st, which is, I guess, a Wednesday.
What day of the
It is.
week? We don't-
It's a Wednesday.
You're
Okay.
not gonna be here?
Well, wait, let me not digress to the details yet. Terry, you have something to say?
No, I was going to agree with you, because I think it sounds like, as far as timing's gonna have to set the priorities, and what you're saying is the Law Oversight Committee is the immediate concern right now. So I was gonna ask who is the most passionate about that would wanna lead that presentation, because it sounds like that's something that has to be done by May 1st.
Well, first of all, just for information only, this presentation has already been given, plus it's online. So,
That doesn't mean they've seen it.
Yeah,
really, Susan?
that's right.
I knew that. But the request to the Law Oversight Group could be, this group is asking you to watch it online with the audience that was in the room at the time. And if, Jeff, there is some addition to what was stated on February 4th, that could also be highlighted to them. Andrea, go ahead.
I would prefer Jeff to deliver it. I just think
Okay.
that passion, sitting in front of a.
How do we make the impact?
I
We've
think
got the
it's-
data, we've got the
Yeah, I mean, I
information.
think it's Jeff,
And
it's
now
a
is-
person.
But he said he can't
Yeah.
go on May 1st.
Not 3 months from now, we don't wanna,
Yeah,
we don't wanna
Sturgis
look
wants
back
to
in
say
6
something.
months and
I think
say.
we're just-
Okay, wait, we've got too many people talking at the same time.
I just, having been to all of their meetings, I don't know, a thought is about this, is that they're kind of past that point.
Well,
In terms
they
of
better
their,
back up.
I mean, I'm just thinking in terms of the input that they've solicited and listened to, they're kind of down to the nuts and bolts at this point. Would that be accurate?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just think that at this point, the appeal that we made is kind of too overreaching and general. I mean, as effective as it was, it doesn't feel like a fit for where they are in the
Let me ask a
process.
question in our last 5 minutes here. Liz, you were there for the end of that last meeting, I think, when I was not. Do you think if the question were posed to the Law Oversight Group, does what you're doing with the ordinance, does it manage, does it help, or does it manage our tree resources to protect them, preserve them, and grow them?
The draft I've seen has not made any progress in that versus what we have now, no.
Does it harm it?
Does it what?
Does it
Harm it.
Does it make it any worse?
I don't know. I mean, I'd say maybe a break even. There's some things that have been made more lenient, some less, but there's been no significant changes in the actual. It's more, the drafts I've seen have been more of a reorganizing and rewording than an actual change in thinking. I think it's the best way to put it. So it looks more like edited than
New thinking.
Revised.
New thinking.
than a 10-year advanced concept. 10 years ago now, we're fast forwarding, we have advanced concepts. So I think what would be helpful if we wanted to, I'm assuming this committee would be, once this draft from Law Oversight goes to the mayor and commissioners, I'm assuming this committee would be called upon to present their advice, right? Mayor's Advisory Committee, right? Are we assuming that's correct?
We could.
Commissioner?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was drifting.
I know the mayor's sitting here too.
I'm
but
drifting.
I'm assuming when their draft goes to the commissioners, mayor and commissioners, that this committee will be part of making some sort of statement or as part of the review process.
Well,
It's a tree code, we're advisory committee on trees.
I can tell you about process, the way I would react to that, and Dick is here as well, and the mayor's here. That if there is a presentation coming to the commissioners that doesn't already answer the question, does it manage our tree resources? Does it help? Does it hurt? What is the intent here in the tree ordinance that's being brought forward? And Mayor, I'm looking at you to help us think out. And Dick, what is the best process? It's either ask the question before they come to us, or ask the question as they're presenting to us. And I would lean toward you ask it before. But I'm not sure, Mayor Dick, if
I
you would,
agree
if
with
you would
that.
like to have it presented.
I've observed enough of these things now that I get a little cynical. That in an ideal world, Liz, it would happen just like you're saying, from my point of view. But we're not in that ideal world, and unless we're, as a committee, very intentional about some kind of intervention, requesting, discussing some kind of intervention, it likely wouldn't happen.
So here's my thought then, since I think we are past the presentation that you would consider giving to them.
Okay.
My thought would be those questions that you're posing, and I think it needs to be, you know, some overarching concepts, like are we managing our tree resources? But I think there needs to be more. Is it clear? Is it concise? Those type of things. Is it flexible? Is it enforceable?
Well, I think the central question I would have is the intent to grow our canopy? I mean, I'm willing to receive a no answer on that.
So,
I mean, yes or no, both acceptable answers.
I think the word
answers.
manage is too broad. When you say manage, that can mean a million things, but like you were just saying, it's encouraging for the growth of trees.
Increase trees.
Right, right.
So,
Preserve high canopies.
Go ahead, Liz.
My suggestion is if you want to make a presentation to them, you obviously would contact Toy to get on their agenda, but to have a list of those questions and say, we plan on being involved in this when this goes to the mayor and commissioners, since we are the advisory committee on trees. We have a vested interest in this. Here are the questions that we hope can be answered about your draft. And maybe they don't answer them in that presentation, but here you go. Here are the 6 questions. This is what we're gonna look at when we're called on to give our opinion, right? I think that forces kind of the issue back on them.
Does that committee take public comments?
Oh, yeah.
I think we should put our comments together, and
Well, you would,
somebody has to give them.
you wouldn't have to be on the I mean, you could request to
We
be
can
on
send
their,
them in,
request to be on their agenda and make a short, you know, get your questions, have them bulleted, put them up on the big screen, everybody can see.
I have a different idea.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if I'm pretty sure this is where we will start our next meeting, but in the meantime, we have someone on our committee who is not only well-versed, but she's heard every single word we've said about what we value, Ms. Lingo. And the questions that I believe need to be asked of the retooling, or whatever word we want to use, for a renewed tree ordinance, I believe that Liz could put those together, or this team could send their question to her if you believe in that approach. Because I know Liz is going to be at every tree ordinance discussion of law oversight. I'm going to be there. Sturgis is going to be there. So I think we have the process already built in, and she's sitting right here.
I am perfectly happy to put them together. I think they would be better presented not by me.
I agree.
And I'm up for that. But I think as our central point of contact,
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I think
That makes sense.
we make this as easy as possible. Give our questions to Liz.
Send the questions to us.
Yeah, so if everybody wants to send me something and try and keep it manageable, like
Yeah.
3-ish, or
Okay.
even if it's one overarching question, but try to keep it as few as possible. I can send out the whole list so everybody sees it and then it edited, so that we can make sure nothing, my editing didn't lose something important.
Give us a deadline.
But I gotta say, I think that would it do any harm to do the presentation? It's only like, what, 15 minutes? It just seems like it's so valuable for background, and it may give them information they didn't have before.
It was 22 minutes because I timed it.
Okay. You know, if they can meet for 4 hours, they can hear 20 minutes. I don't know. I feel like it's so valuable that it makes our questions, puts them in perspective much better.
Or someone could present the questions that when they.
Right.
I'm just speaking as somebody who's been to the meetings, and it just, at this point in time, it just doesn't feel like a productive fit.
Okay.
That's- Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes, we
Polling
have
my
2 minutes.
fellow planning commissioners. We are embarking on developing a questionnaire for, it's going to be distributed to the city, but I'm sure people who do not, live in the city will also be able to respond to this and so forth. And we're in the midst of that now, and we're going to be talking about it in another hour and a half. I would just say, would it be appropriate, you feel, that we take as basically these thoughts that more or less are being endorsed by the tree committee and take it to the planning commission to incorporate them to the extent that we can as part of that survey?
We're saying to make sure there's some good tree questions on the survey.
Right.
I can answer that just for me.
Yeah.
I assume that all three of you are looking out for the interest of this group.
But I
So-
just would like to say that, this is something that
Yeah.
came from the meeting that we all
Yeah.
agree upon, that, so it gives it a little bit more
Okay.
auspices,
Is that part of developing the CDP that?
Right.
The survey is the first one.
Absolutely, yeah,
First.
right.
Yeah.
One question you could ask, I mean, you could certainly have a question that's more eloquent than what I'm about to say, but you could say, what's more important to you, trees or a pool?
Wow.
Tree, something, I don't know.
Well,
is-
but that's not, I don't think that's necessarily an either or question.
Okay, I'm going to bring us back together for just 60 seconds here. On your questions to Liz Lingo, by the last working day of April, please.
Okay.
That will give her I'm sorry, that's the last working day of the last full week of April. What is that? What is that Friday? Somebody's got a calendar?
26.
Friday the 26th of April. Just bang out whatever question that you have, that the intent of the question is to ask the Law Oversight Group, does the ordinance answer that question? Okay, keep that in mind.
And then do we, before that, need to get on their agenda, because their agenda for May 1st will go out before that, for the 7 days. So do we need to get on their agenda, not with the specific questions, but just to be there as part of their agenda?
To do what?
To be part of their agenda,
To do what?
to ask questions, questions from, or discussion from the Mayor's Advisory Committee on Trees or whatever. I'm
Well,
just saying, do we
I
need to
would-
be on the agenda in order to deliver the questions that day?
I guess it depends on what their agenda states. But it,
Might be worth touching base with.
I thought we were
let me
just saying
let me
correspondence.
ask for a minute.
Could be
Good diff.
The intent of these questions is so they can deliberate on whether or not the tree ordinance is really aligned with them. So Liz, you will know exactly what the agenda is for May 1st with the law oversight, right?
Yeah, I mean, once it's posted.
Did they decide they would continue to talk about tree ordinance at the end of the last one?
Yeah, they originally, these 2 4-hour meetings were like 2-part. They were like workshops designed.
Okay, so
to be
May
part of
1st will be about the tree ordinance.
As far as I
All
know,
right, so as long as
yes.
it's about that.
Yeah, so we can
Okay.
work that out.
Is it gonna be another 4-hour meeting or not?
I believe that is,
For 4 hours. It
Okay.
is.
I knew that was the intent.
That's the way it's
Okay,
posted.
got it.
Okay, guys, so we've got a plan. Your feedback is just priceless to me, absolutely priceless. I know sometimes I may sound directive, but it's somewhat helpful in getting us to where we need to be in a little bit over an hour and a half. So we will meet again on the same day as the Planning Commission in May, which has got to be
The
12th or something like that.
If the 3rd's a Friday, then the 10th.
10th.
The 10th?
May 10th will be our next meeting, same time, same place, and we will start exactly where we left off. The Law Oversight Group will have already met on May 1st. We'll debrief that, and we'll go from there.
Sounds good.
Thank all of you.
Don't lose track of what you wrote down, that's the outline for the
It's all right here.
presentation.
It's all right here. Got it. And it's
It's all right
color-coded.
here.
So it's about 11:34. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very, very
Thank
much.
you.